Welcome to Heartwired, Emotionally Intelligent Leadership for an AI World, the podcast where technology meets humanity. I'm Dr. MJ, your host. My guest today is Kathy Leader. She's the founder of Art Process Studio in Santa Barbara, and she guides people and individuals and leaders through a creative process that really helps us to slow down a little bit, to open up our mind, and she is a visual artist. She's a creativity coach, and she does meditation facilitation as well. So, we're here to talk about the creative process, especially in this AI world which we live in now. So, Kathy, welcome to Heartwired.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
The Art Process Studio. That's tell us more about that. And then also, like, what inspired you to do that? And what are you accomplishing with the Art Process Studio?
Yeah, so I'm a visual artist and I grew up in South Africa. I grew up with a mother who was a brilliant artist and at some point became very critical of my work. And that kind of stuck with me until I went to college. I went to art school and I found the professors kind of doing the same thing, dampening my creative spirit. So I landed up doing a master's in art education because I didn't have the confidence in my own work after all of that. When I started teaching art in various institutions, I found that there was a way to encourage creativity as opposed to dampen it. And what I landed up doing was starting my own studio called the Art Process Studio, because what I discovered was that the creative process, which is a very natural, intuitive response as humans to our world and our environment, is something that needs to be encouraged. And the way I found it to be encouraged was by getting people to understand the process and not freak out about the product. And so that's why I called it the Art Process Studio. And I just found that whoever came into my studio was doing these amazing creative projects and ideas because I encouraged them to get away from the product-oriented mind. So that's how I got into working with individuals and then working in corporate environments where, which is totally product-oriented. And so it's not only about the art, but it's about the process and the mind, the creative mindset that I think is incredibly valuable. And that's
Mhm.
how I started, and that's my passion.
Oh, yeah, I can tell, definitely. So when you started working with teams and leaders, what surprised you the most during that process?
Actually, what it surprised me and didn't surprise me that there was a lot of fear and anxiety around making art and creating for people who had done art before or not done art before, because of that product-oriented, business-centered, goal-oriented, bottom line thinking. When it was something unknown and left them feeling a little vulnerable, there was a tremendous amount of anxiety around it, which was kind of interesting to witness.
Hmm.
And then as I worked with them and did the prompting that I do, that I've kind of figured out the best way to dampen that anxiety. Slowly, they just opened up and became not only joyful, but open to each other. in a way that I think normal communication around the conference room table doesn't happen.
So, in essence, you were building that trust in the teams. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And trust in themselves, because there's so many voices that come in to especially in a business setting. There's so many self-critical voices that we have. So my goal was to sort of encourage them to trust themselves in the process, and in that way more interesting creative work evolves from that place.
Thank you. So we're living in this time where AI can do everything. We put a little prompt in and we get all this information, we get all this data, and it's so quick, it's instantaneous. And when that kind of puts us into, are we really exercising and executing on our creativity and the parts of us that help us to create? So, what are your thoughts about that?
AI is here, and it is a tool and a crutch and an adjunct to our existence, personally and professionally. However, it's easy to abuse. It's easy to become lazy, I would say,
Hmm.
and kind of rely on a machine to do the creativity for us. And, there's two results from that. One is that our creative right brain kind of part of our existence starts, dissolving because it's not being used in practice. Leaning on to AI too much, I think, is extremely it's a problem for us as humans, and it's a problem for us to do our best work in the world, because the machine is a analytical one way of working. The machine can't think laterally or openly or quietly. There's always this info, which is straight, it's linear as opposed to lateral. And so I feel like that side needs to be practiced and maintained in order to be able to work creatively with AI. So sort of bringing that analytical support into our more open, intuitive, I think, deeply human way of interacting.
So, can you talk a little bit more about that lateral thinking and what that might look like as opposed to the more lineal type of thinking?
Yeah, so lateral thinking is basically when you open yourself up to lots of different possibilities, almost like the lateral roots of a tree, that's going and finding its food and its water. And then from lateral thinking, instead of linear thinking, which is more this happens, then that happens, then that happens, that process in certain situations is valuable, but it definitely doesn't allow for thinking outside the box and other ideas kind of filtering in when you're more open to that way, sort of lateral thinking. And so I think that's why the creative mindset and using creativity as a tool to practice those skills of lateral thinking is really valuable. It's a great space to try things out. And if it doesn't work, try the next thing and try the next thing and get And what I like about team working in that way is that the roots, the lateral thinking becomes intertwined with other people's lateral thinking,
Mhm.
just like the microrhizomes, underneath the ground. So then there's like an increase in creative burst of ideas. It just has a ripple effect and it just keeps on growing.
Wow. Yep. I love that thought. I love the metaphor of the tree and the roots and expanding out to get those nutrients that they need, just like we need to kind of keep that lateral thinking so that we can tap into really the creative mindset. I love it. Thank you. So, when we talked previously, you mentioned hands on analog creativity. So, what happens to us, like in our body, in our brain, with someone who works with their hands that a screen based workflow or screen based AI could never replicate?
Yeah, definitely. I think analog working, picking up a paintbrush and remembering that it's not just a dropper on a screen that you're putting, but that it's a choice of where you put that paint and how you put it down. I think it also has the added benefit of creating a quieter mindset and a more mindful kind of mindset, because you can't really in a way, I think when you're on the screen you can multitask a lot easier.
Mhm.
There can be a few screens open and you can jump from one screen, but when you've got that paintbrush in your hand, you have to focus on that particular experience, and it brings you so much more into a present state, into a more mindful state. And I believe that if you get into that state, you're going kind of below the surface, that's when magic happens.
Mhm.
Ideas just come out, and there's like a deeper level that wants to come up and does, just through this process of being just with that paintbrush in that moment, not thinking about what that paintbrush's action is going to do or how it's going to turn out, but just based on the kind of ways that I do that or guide it, it's just take that blue paint and see what you can do, how many blues you can make from that one blue paint. And it's just focuses the attention and reminds people of their true natural state, actually.
Yeah. No, well, as you were talking, because I've dabbled in oils, I think I mentioned to you. So I just imagine having that brush in the hand. And you're right, it focuses you, it puts you into a zone, kind of that creative zone, and it's tactile. So I think I love that. Thank you. So, you also mentioned to me that communication and discussions in that more creative, open environment looks very different than when people are meeting in the boardroom or having, those tech-oriented kind of workplaces. So, can you just tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's always fun to watch the energy and the environment change from when people come in to the room that we're going to make art in. Firstly, I think what happens is there's a deep vulnerability. And when everyone realizes that, someone will say, I need a glass of wine to relax. And then someone else will say, oh, I do too. And then it becomes kind of fun because you realize that everyone it has the same experience, similar experiences. And then as we progress in the work, there's a real joyfulness that comes out. There's laughter. And then conversations, like I'm a flower on the wall. I don't think they even realize that I can hear what they're saying, but the conversations are so much less guarded and more open and yeah, I can just say more open. Like they relate to each other in a different way, I think. Like it becomes, we're in this together and we are doing something we don't normally do in front of our computers. So it brings up a whole different discussion. And honestly, by the time they leave the event, there is lightness. That's all I can say is pure lightness, connection. There's real connection. People walk out with their arms around each other. They perhaps sat next to someone they don't even know, and they really get to know them and connect with them. So that's the value of creativity within groups. It's super powerful.
Yeah, I've actually experienced your workshop with one of the groups, and it was really fun. It was a lot of fun to kind of just not think about what you're like. You have to create this great piece of work, just to be there and be in the experience of it. Yes, thank you for doing that type of work, Kathy.
Mm.
So I want to shift over to leaders
Mm.
now. When leaders come into that environment, what shifts, what changes happen when they enter in that art making environment?
What's very obvious to me is that hierarchical energy seems to dissipate because they're all in it together, all doing the same thing, all being kind of vulnerable together. So there's, yeah, sometimes, and usually I don't even know in the beginning, I may know who's the boss. Like by the time it finishes, there's this sense of everyone's on an equal playing field. And that allows, I think, in the workplace for workers to feel more safe to talk to the leaders, to say, this is what I'm feeling, and I think there's more receptivity from the leaders who've experienced this as well. So that's why I actually think it's as important, because sometimes companies call me and they're just doing this for the employees, but when I get leadership involved, it ups the ante, and I think it really gives them something to think about.
Mm.
We always discuss it at the end, like how different this mindset that you have right now, how differently would you react to someone who came in to see you with a problem? I think for leaders, it's incredibly valuable to remember, because there's a lot of isolationism
Mm.
in leadership. And so I think it's just helpful for them to remember that they're really just, one in the cog, but they're also part of the whole.
Yeah, yeah. So, I talk a lot about leading with heart in the age of AI. And what does that mean to you? I know it's not like you're working in a company and you're working, I'm sure you work with AI, but you're not working on a day to day basis in that whole sphere. But also tell me how that creative process comes in to fit into that emotional intelligence piece.
Well, I think it's totally tied in, because I don't think you can really enter the creative process without coming from, or without accessing your heart, where your heart is, because it'll come up automatically in that open field. The heart doesn't have to really be accessed. It's there already. It's just about allowing that to come into the space. And that's where mindfulness helps, because it quietens the brain so that you can access the heart energy more. And creativity does the same thing. It quietens the critical brain thoughts, the constant overthinking, and it allows us to sink into that deeper, heart-centered space that we already have. We just have forgotten, and we have lost touch with it because of all the noise.
Yeah. And we have a lot of noise these days.
Gosh.
Yeah. In every aspect of our lives.
Right.
When you're thinking about, you mentioned mindfulness. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by mindfulness and how does that fit into the whole creative process?
Right. So mindfulness, of course, is an overused word these days, but what it really means is paying attention one moment at a time. That's really what it means. So whatever you're doing, whether it's eating or writing or even being on the computer, being aware, paying attention to the experience just one moment at a time. And the creative process is all about that. It's all about paying attention, doing some painting or drawing or collage, whatever you're doing, one moment at a time. You are really making choices. You're making a choice to stick something down, and just by design, it is a mindful process. So that's why I think it's such a valuable tool to get into that mindful space. If you're someone who, there's a lot of people who feel like they can't meditate, it's just too hard. And there's a lot of misunderstanding around what meditation is, but I won't go into that right now. But it's just this idea of mindful, you're going for a walk, whatever you're doing, just paying attention one moment at a time.
I love that. So if there's one thing you would like the people who are listening to walk away with, what would that be?
It would be, remember that you are intuitively and born with a creative spirit. And it doesn't belong to the few artists who are born with this incredible talent. It actually belongs to all of us. And if we can own that, it can change a lot of things in your life.
Thank you. That's really powerful. I really appreciate that, Kathy. Thank you for being here today and joining the Heartwired community. I really do appreciate and what you're bringing in. This is why I'm doing this podcast, because it's the human touch and leadership and being that creative being that you talk about, as well as the emotional intelligence and building the trust, the collaboration, and that's why you're working within that area. So thank you.
You're so welcome. I really enjoyed that conversation.
Yes, great. For those of you who are listening, and if you think somebody needs to hear this, please share this episode with someone you know. And also be sure to subscribe so you can continue to listen to these great conversations and these wonderful people like Kathy that join me on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.